Sheldon, it's here, the final, or should I say the semi-final, sort of. I was a little confused on the formatting of this playoff of the
I was
challenge.
very confused. I was very confused too. I feel like there are a lot of moving pieces, a lot of moving parts, and yeah, I'm still kind of confused because it just ended. There wasn't even like a trailer at the end or anything,
No.
so yeah, I don't know what's going on. What's happening next week? Like, is it a full hour of them trying to put together this puzzle? Like, what's going on, right?
Well, I have the answers for you, but first we should introduce ourselves so that our listeners are not as confused as we were by last night's episode of the challenge. I'm John Chidley Hill.
Yes. And my name, once again, as always, is Sheldon Alexander.
And this is You Killed It, the podcast about the challenge. Of course, this season has all been about vendettas, which is a word that, as much as I've loved this season, I'm overhearing the word vendetta. It's been too much. They've gone back to that well too many times, Sheldon.
I mean, it's interesting because I feel like this season, as annoying as you might be with the term now, if you look forward or look ahead to upcoming seasons, I feel like there'll be a lot of beef from this season that will carry over into the next rounds. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, 100%.
Like, I feel like 2 or 3 challenges from now, people will still be mad at Tony. Like, I think Kyle will have a way bigger target on his back if he comes back again.
Yes.
You know what like, I just think like a lot of those things will go down. The Melissa stuff and Kaylee and Kayla and any other person that has a name that sounds very familiar to them.
All those
right?
names that we have a hard time remembering how to say.
Yes.
So to answer your question off the top, what's going to happen is that next week is the first part of the 2-part reunion special. And just as they did for Dirty 30, they're going to be announcing the winner at the reunion.
Okay. Sounds good. I mean, I'm up for that.
Are you? I don't love that.
I like finding out. I like maybe not a 2-part reunion. Like, that's not really necessary.
Yeah.
But I do enjoy finding out who wins on the reunion with the whole cast there. I think that's pretty cool.
See,
but
I'm gonna disagree with you there. I don't like it because I like it when they've had a little bit of time to stew and get bitter. You know what I mean? Because, like, in the moment, if you're a good person, like, if your heart is pure, in the moment, you're just gonna, like, clap and be like, oh, congratulations, good job, Zach, or whoever. But if you find out and then you have to stew for a bit, then like, maybe the bitterness overcomes you, which makes for better television. if I'm being honest.
Assume. But unless there's another twist here or another event, for lack of a better term, won't they know who won? Like, they're gonna announce, like, the people who are in the final. I mean, right?
Yeah, that's true.
They're gonna know who won, right? So
that's true.
I would assume that by the time they tape the reunion, everybody else on the cast also knows. I would assume
that's true.
But I mean, at the same time, I still think it'll be fun just because so much ish went on during the season. And as much as I'm dissing the reunion, the 2-part reunion now, I feel like there's enough juice that if they play it correctly, you might have enough, like, entertainment to discuss over 2 episodes.
Oh, and we're still going to record You Killed It to break down every single second of both reunions.
Oh, yes, because I love the juice. I love the drama, for sure. That's why I'm here.
I have to circle back to something that you said, though. You said that you feel like a lot of new vendettas, a lot of new beefs were started. And I agree with you. There are definitely a lot of beefs, like Tony and Johnny Bananas. But I also feel like some beefs were squashed, right? Like, Tony and Brad were supposed to be each other's vendettas coming in, and now they're cool, or more cool.
I think maybe Tony just made greater vendettas than Brad, I think.
That's true.
But I know what you're saying.
But, like,
I gotcha.
Kayla and Marie had issues heading in, and now they are part of the Suicide Squad, right? Like, there are some people who sort of were like, this is silly, let's move on.
Nope, very true.
And then there's some other people who hate each other even more. Which brings us to the actual competition on last night's episode.
Okay. Yes. Okay. So first off, I want to ask you, like, who were you rooting for? Like, at the start of the episode, when they're doing the whole, Leroy and Tony are trying to make up with each other. They're kind of everyone's kind of talking strategy. Are you ready? What are we going to wear? All that crap, right?
Yeah.
When they're setting up the finale, in your mind, who were you hoping would win?
That's a good question, because I asked myself that at various points of the show, where I found myself disappointed that one person was doing badly or one person was doing well. I'm like, who am I cheering for? I would say that my top picks were Leroy and Kam. Like, I really wanted to see Leroy come back from having no money in the bank, from well, I don't want to say he got screwed, because he persevered and won his competition against Brad. But I still, I'd have vested, I don't know, I was rooting for Leroy most, and also Kam. Just because, I think she's hilarious, and, it'd make a good Rookie of the Year. Although I also appreciated that they were coming in as the underdogs, for sure. And as things progressed, when we moved on to the final four, I was definitely cheering for Zach and Cara Maria, which I don't know. I'm kind of torn between Kayla and Cara Maria, but definitely Zach. Zach has earned being there. Who are you cheering for?
I think, like most people, I feel like we would all be rooting for Leroy. I feel like a lot of people would be rooting for Leroy just because super nice guy. It'd be good to see him win. He didn't really backstab anyone. He wasn't as annoying as I think Tony was.
Yeah.
And I think it just would have played out too perfectly for Tony to win. Do you know what I mean? The challenge never really goes like that, right? The person who is at the forefront of the entire season, quote unquote, calling the game or running the game, that person rarely ever wins, right?
Yes.
And I thought that if it was between Tony and Zach and one of them were going to win, it's normally the person who's in the background, not the person who's at the forefront of making all these moves. And that was definitely Tony for most of the season. So I didn't think he was going to win. I was definitely rooting for Leroy, but it was more hopeful and wishful. Whereas for the girls, I was like, yeah, Kara's probably going to win. Not that I wanted her to win, but I just felt like rooting against her would be a waste of time, because she'd probably end up winning.
I think one of my problems with Kayla, and this is a minor complaint, because I've really grown to like her. I didn't like her the first few seasons that she was on, but she doesn't seem very well-rounded in terms of what she's good at. I was surprised how much she struggled in straightforward running. Right? She immediately lost ground. And I know that they were all in shackles, but they were all in shackles. It's not they were equally handicapped, and she was just dunzo. So
Kayla to me is a great example of what this challenge game is all about, in terms of, yes, it's obviously a physical challenge. There's so much running, and you gotta, you know what I mean? It's obviously an endurance battle, and it's a physical challenge, obviously. But when you see what happens to Kayla, it's a reminder to me that there's so much of this game is mental. And what happens to her, I think, is the mental part of it. Whether she hits adversity, she kind of doubts herself and gets down on herself. She gets to the armor and she's like, oh my gosh, I can't figure out how to put this on, and just throws it on the ground and storms off. You know what I mean? That doesn't make any sense at all. You're just taking this off of a rack and putting it on. It's not that complicated. I understand that maybe the strap might be a little off or something might be a little weird. You know what I mean? It's not that big of a deal in the grand scheme of things, right?
Yep.
And I think that she is a reminder that, there's another side to this game other than the physical aspects of it, because I think physically she's a pretty good competitor.
Yeah, and she played the social game really well right? And
Yeah, she made friends.
she made friends, which in the past has been hard for her. Like in the past, one of the criticisms has been, Kayla doesn't really mix well. She just wants to talk to Jenna. Like she made like her little crew, and generally like seemed to get along with Zach, seemed to get along with Leroy, right? And like I think one of the low key things is that she and Leroy both live in Las Vegas, right?
Ah, okay. Yeah.
So like that doesn't automatically make you friends, but it seems like they found common ground.
Yes, it was definitely ended up being a number on your side, which we talk about it all the time, how much numbers play a role in the overall scheme of this game, right?
Yeah. And you made a good point when you said that, Leroy played the game clean, and it's true. Like, I mean, Leroy has a new vendetta or two in Tony and Kara, but he didn't fire the first shot. Right? Like, he's not the originator of the beef. He was just like, yo, this is fucked up, which he's entitled to do. But, like, it wasn't through any sort of misbehavior on his part. He just, like, was like, hey, you guys are doing me dirty right now, and I do not appreciate it, which is, fair. That's fair comment.
No, totally agree. But what did you think of this actual final challenge, just in terms of there's so many parts, but it all seemed to center around this castle, right, in multiple stations and checkpoints, as normally the finales end up being, right? A lot of checkpoints and a lot of different moving parts, for lack of a better term. But yeah, essentially you had to run around this castle, get to different checkpoints, get your coins, whatever, right? But the biggest thing that I was looking forward to, and maybe it ended up being the biggest disappointment to me,
was Johnny Bananas.
And stop me if I'm like skipping ahead too much, but
no,
just the role of the mercenaries, right? Like I was expecting something a little bit bigger or grander, or like something just better than them playing high-low.
Yeah.
No? What were your thoughts on how they use the mercenaries?
Well, as you and I were discussing before we went on air and started rolling, I watched the Raptors game first, Raptors at Cleveland, and then I had the challenge on PVR, and so like I started watching it like when it was halfway done, but already I was getting some text messages about it, and I was getting texts from my girl Tony Hammer, who all of a sudden was like, "What? High-low? Johnny Bananas? This is bullshit." And you know what? Yeah. Tony was right. We were like, he has legitimate beef with especially Tony and to a lesser extent Zach, and I want to see something physical, right?
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, I sort of understand why they couldn't, because if Johnny Bananas has to go toe to toe with four guys, the fourth guy has an advantage in that Johnny Bananas is going to be worn out. But also, that kind of makes it a tighter game, right? Like if Johnny Bananas puts up the most fight against whoever's in first, that'll slow down the first place person. And the fourth place person, because Johnny Bananas will be at his weakest, I don't know. I have more issues with the mercenaries. Why were they wearing Under Armour to play high-low? Which again was a point that Tony made. But like, why weren't they just wearing hoodies and sweats? Like, why did they need to be all like geared up for battle? And also, Melissa had to be the weakest mercenary that they called on. Like, aside from like going toe to toe with a very sick Sylvia for an hour, Melissa's done nothing. So, like, I don't know. Like, it should have been like, oh, you gotta wrestle CT for this, like, drumstick or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with you in terms of why were they all dressed up to just play cards, essentially. Totally agree with you there. You're right, Melissa was a weird choice, but
I guess
Melissa might be one of those things where... Yeah, that's what I was going to say. When we get to the actual reunion special, Melissa might be one of those things where it's like, oh, yeah, I almost forgot that happened, right?
Yeah.
Like the whole fight with Cam and Kayla and them, like when that all went down, the whole shit with her and Nicole, which maybe might have been a twist, if Nicole had made it that far and her ankle didn't give out.
Yeah, I think they were banking on that, right? Like, they should have seen each other face to face.
Yeah, right? And I think that would have been a much bigger thing. But overall, to me as well, if this was the road they were going down, I was convinced that they would have rigged the game.
Yeah.
Because I was thinking that's what I would have done as a producer, right? I would have rigged the cards so that you could easily manipulate the order of high-low and manipulate it so that, you know what I mean? Like, they're going to lose.
Yeah.
Or the odds of them losing are greater. Right? And that's what I assumed was going to happen. And to further your point that you made, right? If you take out the first person, at least you're making it way more exciting in terms of an overall episode, right? Someone gets out to a great lead. You rig the cards so that the person who comes in first, they quote unquote lose. But, and I think that would have given Johnny Bananas his moment to have like a funny kind of cackling laugh of screwing over Tony or Zach or whoever. You know what I mean? I think that would have been so much more fun. But instead, it seemed like the opposite happened. Like, no one was even really close. I think Kam only really lost because she made the dumb play ahead of time, right? Where I think she got a 7 and she said, was that it? I can't remember what it was, but she did something really dumb.
She did.
Like, I want to say maybe it was a 10 and she said higher, maybe?
Yeah, she did.
I can't remember what it was, but
she screwed up.
Either way, yeah, she screwed up, and that's the only reason why she lost. So I thought if you were playing this game, you would definitely rig it so that, you give that camera time to Johnny Bananas, but you also build up a storyline in terms of, yep, one person got screwed over. Because in theory, if Kam doesn't do that, nobody was getting screwed, right? Everyone was just going through free and clear.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really weird.
I thought it wasn't, I don't know, high-low is too easy. And I don't want to say they skated through, but essentially amounted to like a break to catch their breath for most of them.
Yes.
And like,
totally.
If Kam had made a better decision, it would have, they all would have breezed through it and would have affected no one except to, like I said, to catch their breath, have an awkward moment. I loved when Kyle, though, said to Johnny Bananas, "Don't forget, I'm not Tony."
Yeah. With the grenades, right, that the mercenaries had. First off, I feel like we got to stop calling them mercenaries because they don't deserve that title.
No.
First off, but the grenades that they had, right? Was the first one that you had to drink a bunch of water?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I thought so, but I wasn't positive. I don't know. I just thought it would have been so much better served to have multiple people obviously lose in high-low. And that was obviously, if you're going to have such an easy, quote-unquote, easy, role for the mercenaries, at least make them win. Like, you could fake it, and not fake it, but rig it so that someone's going to lose, right? Like, you give them an obvious number of like a 4, so you obviously know they're going to say higher, but you rig it so that the next card is a 2. Like, I thought that was the obvious play here, and I'd wonder why they wouldn't have done that. Now, I know I would have been sitting here calling it and saying, hey, this is probably rigged, but it would have been for a way better... It would have been a way better joke. It would have been way better entertainment, way better content for the episode than what actually happened. Like, imagine watching someone having to chug all that water. That would have been hilarious.
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure that they actually had to drink all of the water. They weren't clear on that.
Oh.
Because, like, I think that was the grenade that they could use if a friend of theirs lost.
Ah, okay. I got you.
Right? Like,
that makes sense.
If Leroy lost to Bananas, I think Bananas would
He would have said, drink water.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was also thinking, before we knew that it was just high-low, I was thinking, like, oh, man, I hope Johnny Bananas takes a dive for Leroy. Yeah. Right? Because that's the way you would really fuck over Tony and Zach. And also,
for sure,
you help out your bud who never betrayed you.
Yeah, no, totally.
Right?
Totally, right? And so we jumped ahead to this high-low game because we were so angry or upset about the mercenaries. But we skipped over the beginning part with the swords, right? So a couple things happened there. Or, sorry, they had to carry the torches.
Yeah, the
My
torches
bad, not the
back
swords.
And forth.
So Nicole gets hurt, right? And I don't know how much you care about that. I was like, whatever, Nicole, get out of here. Don't really care. Wasn't really rooting for her to win. I feel bad for her on a level, but I'm kind of with Tony when Tony's like, come on, let's go. Tough it out or whatever, right? And she couldn't do it. Cool, no problem. But the biggest issue that I have here, right? Because not only did Nicole kind of ruin, like she took a lot of the drama out of what was going on the girls' competition.
Yeah.
Because it was kind of just like who would outlast the other between Kayla and Kam. It was kind of like who would suck the least.
Yeah.
Which isn't as fun to watch, obviously. But for me, the biggest thing here was a guy's comp, right?
Yes.
So the twist was you had to run and take a bunch of torches out of one of your buckets or baskets, whatever, run to the other side and basically transfer them to the other side. But the catch was when you get to the other side, you could take one of your opponent's torches out of their basket and return it. So basically they would just be wasting time. So what ends up happening was Tony, Zach, try to gang up on Leroy, right? Mm-hmm. So their focus is on Leroy, wasting Leroy's time. Leroy is obviously returning the favor to them. Meanwhile, nobody's worried about Kyle, and now Kyle's also taking away from Zach and Leroy. From Zach and Tony, and nobody's taking away from Kyle's. So Kyle ends up getting the biggest advantage ever because no one's really targeting him. At least that's how they edited it, right?
Yeah, no, I think that's what happened.
And Kyle gets off scot-free. Like, I was just like, didn't you guys think this through? And I don't know. What was your take on that whole thing?
I agree with everything you just said, but also, maybe they were just tired, but like, as you said, Tony and Zach were taking from Leroy, and Leroy was alternating between taking from Tony and Zach. And they were arguing with each other as they ran back and forth, saying, like, if we keep doing this, we'll be here all day. But that doesn't add up. Like, Tony and Zach should have been, like, removing from Leroy's torch bucket twice as fast, because there's two of them. Unless they're half as fast as Leroy. Like, Leroy cannot...
Which I don't think that's the case.
Yeah, no. Leroy would have won handedly if he was twice as fast as them. Right? So, like, they're all like, oh, we'll be doing this all day. But, like, no, that's not accurate. That's not how this works. So,
and then,
I don't...
But also, too, you got to remember, Tony ended up being the last one out of there.
Yes.
Right? So, like... I mean, when Kara first said, hey, how about we don't take each other's out, we just make this a game. At first, I was kind of like, shut up, Kara. But then I thought about it, and as it went along, I'm like, actually, she makes the most sense, right? Mm-hmm. Because if you just keep going, all you're doing is tiring everyone out, right? Because as soon as you take one out of someone else's basket, they're returning the favor, which means you're also extending the time that you're there doing it, right? And so she actually did have a point. Hey, let's not do this and go at each other's. Let's just run it ourselves and try to race it out ourselves instead of adding more time. It made sense. And I will say it's one of the times where at first I was like, Kara's so annoying. But in reality, she's totally right. She's right about that. But after Nicole does reach in and take something from her basket, just let it go. Because she's already done it. There's no point in arguing with her, right? Like, while it's happening and be like, why would you do that? Blah, blah, blah. Like, that makes no sense. You're wasting your own energy in arguing. And plus, it's not like she's going to put it back. So what is arguing with her going to accomplish in this situation, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. It was super weird.
It was, their attitudes were strange, but I think that they were tired and rattled. Like, I think they were rattled by the whole situation.
Like, it seemed really cold and, like, really wet, and just, like, the weather playing a part as well, and your fatigue definitely would not help your mental, I feel like, no?
I agree. It would mess you up.
What did you think of just how this kind of went down? Like, because, yes, it was a lot of running, but then, as we discussed earlier, right, it's more than just running because there's a mental side to it, right? So you're not just running. How do you run with shackles on? How do you run wearing armor? Right? Like, they added all these other elements to it. What did you make of that?
I really liked the like medieval theme, and I liked
Mhm.
the I liked like having to wear the armor and having to wear the shackles. Like I liked a lot of what was going on. Um,
Okay.
but I didn't. The competitions themselves were not hard. You know, like they weren't.
Very true. Yeah, they weren't hard at all.
I mean, it was tiring. Like it'd be tiring
Mhm.
having to run in armor and stuff. But like the maybe is that they're taking it easy on each other. But the sword game where they had to. It was just like a peg game, and they had to draw them out.
Yeah. Yeah.
They
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
just ended up drinking hot chocolate, basically, or like cheese, and it didn't like the cheese. Aside from taking more time, didn't seem to slow Kyle at all. Like I don't know, it
No.
wasn't a big deal. It seemed.
Yeah, none of it really. You're totally right. None of these games on their own were particularly hard, right? And so all of it was based off of maybe they would mess up because they'd be mentally fatigued, carrying the armor for that long or whatever. It just seemed really weird, and I think if you go back and listen to maybe I don't remember which one of the finales it would be, John, but I remember at one point talking about a challenge where us watching it doesn't really make it seem that hard, like, but I feel like them actually doing it, like if you put yourself in like all this armor and try running whatever distance it was, which I don't even know if they ever mentioned how far the distance was, right? Which they probably should have.
Yeah.
And I think trying to do that in mud, like with shackles on, would be a lot harder than it actually appears to be us just watching it. Do you know what I mean? And I think that might have been an issue in terms of the entertainment factor, right? Like I think we probably needed to see more people falling down or, because we just got a lot of like running montages or people running really slow. And so because that's what we're seeing, it doesn't look like it's that hard. When in reality it's really hard. No?
Yeah, I think it'd be exhausting, but I think the actual activities were not that hard. Like we already put down the high-low. The hardest thing was probably the torches, which was just more running.
Yeah.
I will say...
For sure. But again, the strategy to it, too.
There is strategy. I will say that the part, to me, that seemed really hard was actually sort of the final. So, and I think that's part of where you and I got confused, was that TJ said, like, there's 8 of you and there's only 4 spots in my final. And so it seemed like they were building to a bigger final, but I guess the final is just a memorization game of like a polka dot board. And like
Yeah, I found that really weird.
You have to memorize this board and then like run through part of the castle to where your actual board is and replicate it. So the ones who made it that far were Zach and Kyle for the men, and as we mentioned, Kara and Kayla for the women. But whoever comes in first, like regardless of gender.
Yeah,
that's like it's all the winnings are up for grab. Like it's first through fourth, and
so
go ahead.
No. I was just gonna say, like, you're right. So they broke it all down in terms of the money, but the thing that I found super interesting was that you didn't get to. So like Tony, who had the most money in his bank, right?
Yeah.
Because he didn't make the final, he goes home with nothing.
Yeah.
Leroy, on the other hand, who had nothing in his bank, basically, if he had made it through, though, right, he would only been playing for what? The 4th place person would have gotten, what was it, $4,000? I think it was $5,000. Yeah. So that would have been really interesting or upsetting, I guess, if you were Leroy. I guess that was another cool wrinkle that, in theory, could have been a way bigger issue, but it didn't really play out that way. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because the whole time we were wondering for the whole season, like, would all these people banking their money, would that actually matter? Like, would it be that big of a deal? Right? And it was kind of cool to see that, oh, shit, it would have been. Because the other part, too, was that if you came in first, you get also all of the other money that all the people that had banked went home with.
Yeah.
Sorry, let me rephrase that. All of the people, when they went home, their money went all into the bank. And so you would get that money.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
That's
right. That was a cool twist.
That's a cool twist. And I'm glad we're talking about the money, because this is something that I actually would have liked to have seen tweaked. I like how they ended up doing it, but I think the mercenaries all season would have been better if they had the incentive of, if a mercenary wins, they get the money from the person that they beat, and then they get to bounce.
That's interesting.
Right?
That's interesting.
Because I think we had an issue in some of the competitions where the mercenaries didn't try their best.
Yes, there were some questions along the way, people wondering if Tori tried her hardest against Kam, which we don't know, and we'll never know really. But yeah, you would eliminate that for sure if you gave them the extra incentive to try by, hey, you can get this person's $5,000 or whatever they had, $10,000 by just dummying them in this one elimination. I mean, Darrell would be even hungrier, right? Like, that would be so
Darrell
amazing.
is who I was thinking of, because he sort of let Nelson off the hook, right? He was like, yeah, I'm willing to take a draw. But if you told Darrell, like, actually, you could win Nelson's $15,000 or however much he had, I think Darrell would be like, no, I got lots of gas in the tank. Let's keep going.
Yes. Very true. Very true. Let's talk a little bit, though, about a couple people who didn't make it, right? I was really disappointed in Leroy just in terms of he was in the lead.
Yeah.
Right? Like, very close to the end. Like, when it just turned into a straight running challenge, he was in the lead. And then, as he said, Zach and Kyle didn't just pass him. They ran past him.
Yeah.
I was kind of disappointed by that because I felt like, Lee, like, this was your chance. You're in the final. You're here. You're off to such a good start. You're in the lead, and it's just the home stretch, just a straight run. And that's when I think it really becomes mind over matter, right? And those guys just blew past him. And I think, that was really disappointing for me in terms of, because as I said, I was rooting for Leroy to win. And I think a lot of people wanted to see Leroy come through. And it was just kind of like, oh, man, like, they just ran by you? Like, that's it? That's all you got?
Well,
it was a bit of a letdown.
Especially because Leroy had caught up to Kyle and they did the sword game together. And he beat Kyle in the sword game. Like, he was in a position, like, he made Kyle stop. So it wasn't just like Kyle had a lot of momentum and surged past him. Like, he had brought Kyle to a dead stop. I think it was Kayla who tweeted last night that it was funny that they all feel like at some point it's going to be revealed that Kyle was actually an Olympian. Because he was so fast. Like, any running competition, Kyle just killed everyone. And I want to point something out as to why I think that is. I think that what Kyle has going to his advantage is that he's much thinner than the rest. And it actually, when you're running, it's to your benefit to not be carrying a lot of weight, right? Like, a guy like Zach or Leroy, I don't want to say they're top heavy, but because they have, like, big backs and chests and arms and shoulders, that's weight that your legs are carrying that isn't, like, contributing to the act of running. Whereas Kyle, being, like, a thinner guy, not that he's in bad shape, but he isn't carrying that extra weight. So he gets to zip along. When it comes to just straight running, he's obviously, the downside is he's not as good at carrying things. But this competition, this challenge final, there wasn't a lot of carrying, right? Like, sure, you had to carry the armor on you as you ran, but, like, again, your legs are really doing the lifting, right? Like, when you're wearing the weight, it's not up to your biceps or triceps to keep it aloft.
No, definitely. Like, his strength seemed to be endurance throughout the whole season. When a lot of people would be gassing out during challenges, he seemed to be just keeping an even pace, and he didn't really seem to gas out at all, really, in any of the episodes. And I think, you know, that's just a different kind of strength, right? Because I think when a lot of people end up training, and I'm using the term training in terms of, I know there's a difference between what like Emily does as opposed to what, like, let's say Kayla does, right?
Yeah.
And what I mean is, either way, when people are training for the show, I think they're so much more focused on getting stronger and getting fit, but really a lot of it comes down to endurance.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And I think that's a completely different thing to be training for. And I wonder if, and I'm not saying that Kyle did train for that, like who knows? We don't know that. But I just think a lot of people end up coming on the show and they'll be, oh yeah, I go to the gym 3 times a week and I'm doing this and I'm getting stronger and I'm getting more fit, which yes, does help you. But I feel like endurance training would help you a whole lot more in this challenge.
Also,
right?
I think one of the benefits of like long distance running training is that it's really hard psychologically. Like if you run for longer than 10 kilometers, which is approximately 6 miles for our American listeners, it's hard on you because you get bored and like you get in your own head. And it's not like doing straight weightlifting where you're just counting reps, where it's about mental endurance, which in a situation like the challenge where you've got tons of money on the line, there's something to be said for having that mental toughness to like keep putting one foot in front of the other and not giving up. So I think that there's also psychological benefits to running. I also have to talk about Leroy and Kam not making it to the Final Four, because I had tweeted about this and you and I discussed it off air last week. But but it's been now more than a decade since an African American has won a season of the challenge, which I would have really liked to have seen, just because I think having diversity is good. And one way of looking at it is that for like young African American kids, it's actually would have been really uplifting to be like, oh, like I could be like Leroy or I could be like Kam. And especially with the, like, I don't want to say checkered racial history of this show, but Leroy has said himself.
No, but that's a very fair point.
Yeah.
That's a very fair point, though.
Leroy himself has said, like, there have been whole seasons where Leroy is the only African American or biracial person to appear on the show. I think they've made strides in terms of having African American or biracial competitors on the show. Certainly we've seen a lot more in the past 5 or so seasons. But he's right, there's whole seasons where there was just him, basically. So it would have been just like a refreshing change. And just for like long-term challenge fans, let me break it down. Let me give the facts. The last African American to win a season was Nehemiah, who his team won Gauntlet 3 on March 26, 2008. So really like a full decade. And Darrell, of course, won Champs versus Pros. But I don't think anyone really counts Champs versus Pros and Champs versus Stars as like a proper season.
No, we do not really count that.
No.
It's there, but we don't really count.
You know what? We don't count it as breaking Johnny Bananas' curse, so I don't think we should count it towards this as well. And
agreed.
I will say that Latina has won twice, because Camilla has won twice in that decade, right? And she's from Brazil. But aside from that, every other person who's won is white, aside from Camilla, which is not great in terms of having a variety of people from a variety of backgrounds. So, worth pointing out.
I think, though, too, though, as you look towards the future of the challenge, like, you can tell that they made a lot of different strides in terms of diversity. And it's not just about black and white. If you talk about, LGBTQ, you know what I mean? Like, there's a lot more different people from different backgrounds just being on this show in general. And I think that if you look at a lot of the young bucks coming, as like the Johnny Bananas wave kind of, eliminates itself, I might look at it and say, there's more, the numbers will be more in the other category than it would be in the just token white guy category, right? Like if we look at the fact of, you're going to have the Nelsons and Coreys and, you know what I mean? Like you're going to have like that crew coming up a lot more than you're going to have just Johnny Bananas hanging around again with his crew.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
And
I feel like when you look at the Young Bucks, it's a lot more. And even when you take it to the girls, the female side as well, it's the same thing. One thing I wonder, though, right? Sorry, did you have another point on this?
Well, I did want...
Sorry.
I wanted to make the point that I agree with you that by having a more diverse cast, obviously that increases the chance of a more diverse winner. And I agree that this has... And we've talked about this before. I think it was 2 or 3 episodes ago. I went on a rant about how like Johnny Bananas is kind of the last of the frat boy, Evan and Kenny, and like I mean Brad and Derek K were of that generation as well, and CT certainly. But we're moving past that like straight white guys dominating this show, and like I'm here for it. I'm all for it. Obviously, we've had different members of the LGBTQ community win, like Frank and Sam both won Battle of the Seasons as examples. And I know in the past, Sarah Rice has identified as bisexual. So, and they've had...
Do you know what's interesting, though? This was probably the first season in a while. And maybe I'm forgetting one of the fights, but I don't remember... anything coming up in this season that involved like, racism or sexism or discrimination of any sort, or do you know what I mean? Like I don't remember, and I can't really remember another season like that.
No.
You know what and there was a lot of drama still.
Yeah.
But there was nothing in terms of, going overboard and crossing the line in terms of, again, sexism or racism or discrimination or anything like that. It was just more so the drama that did occur was more so just people being drunk and stupid.
Yeah, I like the fight between Cam and Melissa wasn't about Melissa sort of sampling bisexuality. It was that they don't like each other. Like her sexual orientation didn't come up. And I think that does reflect a more diverse house. And I also think just that's sort of the way society is evolving, where it's less of an issue for people. But you're right. I think you're right, because certainly Dirty 30 had Camilla's ugliness. And previous seasons, the one that comes to my mind is Anissa versus Trishelle, where Trishelle made comments about
I do remember
about Anissa's racial identity and how she was confused as to what she is. And there's been other incidents too.
For sure, totally.
So,
I think too, the one thing that's interesting, right? Like, as we're having this conversation, I was realizing how cool it is that, I don't think like, obviously Leroy is black, but the way that most reality shows are casted, it's like, oh, this is a black guy. He's wild and crazy. He's intimidating. He's going to beat up this guy. You know what I mean? Like, it's really typecasted. And it's funny when you think of the great job that this show does, you don't really think of Leroy in that, like, Leroy isn't that character, for lack of a better term. You know what I mean? And even Cam, even Cam as well, like, Cam is just as fiery or as jokes as Kayla was, or getting in as many fights as Kayla was, but she also played the role of like calming down Kayla at certain points or calming down Marie at certain points. Do you know what I mean? Like even Nicole, we're talking about Nicole as a competitor, but we're not really talking about her sexual orientation as being, a major factor in terms of something being a negative, right? Like, oh, it was just, she was hooking up with people in the house. Cool. Whatever, right? Like, it's not a big deal. And I think like that's really cool to see from this season of the challenge in comparison to other seasons that we've recently had where there's so much other drama surrounding those issues, right?
Yeah. I also think we have to give Leroy credit for sticking it out and not necessarily succumbing to playing into that stereotype that you're just describing.
For sure.
And I mean, I think he put up with a lot of shit. Everyone points to the incident with Camilla and how he held his tongue. But also, there was, I don't know if you remember this, but I guess it was Battle of the Exes, where he and Naya won, and they got, and like, on that season, the couple that won
I definitely remember.
always got a special meal, and it was usually pizza, but when Leroy and Naya won, they got fried chicken, which
I do remember.
I hope was just a coincidence, but if it was a coincidence, it was a really
or maybe
poorly...
they requested it. I don't know. Yeah, I don't remember, but I do remember that episode being a thing.
Well, he pointed it out, like, on the episode. He's like, hey, I'm just pointing out, like, the black people won and they got fried chicken. That's kind of loaded. He's like, but I'm also happy because I love fried chicken. Like, he made it into a joke, but I think he's put up with a lot of shit. And I have to say, even from my tweet about, like, the last African-American to win a season, I only got one comment, but I got one comment that was negative. Be like, what, we should just cheer for them because they're black? I was like, no. I said it's another reason to root for them. Not the only reason. Because, like, Leroy and Kam deserve to be there. And, like, Leroy especially, who's, I think this is his 9th season, like, he would have begun competing around the time that Nehemiah won. So, like, Leroy has, like, paid his dues and then some, right? It's just like a bonus that it'd be cool to have seen some diversity in the winners.
Leroy almost played the role of Loyola Chicago, you know, like, just in terms of, like, you know, the upset, you know, Leroy getting to the finals, he's right there. He got to the Final Four, but then they kind of, like, had a very sad ending. You know, right before the final, didn't quite make it, but you were rooting for them the whole time. You know, I kind of felt the same way about Leroy and Sister Jean and Loyola Chicago. But one question for you, okay? They didn't announce, like, how the prize money would break down until the very end. Do you think that they kind of made a mistake in doing that? Because if you told people ahead of time, you only get money if you make it to the final, do you think that changes? Because everyone assumed that this was the final, right? So I bet somewhere along the way, in the middle of this competition, if I'm losing, if I'm struggling, or I think, oh man, I could maybe catch this person, but I'm not really sure, but whatever, I'm in the final, I'm going to leave with money anyways. It's a lot easier for you to just give up or, like, continue to chill, as opposed to if you knew, hey, only 2 people go through and those 2 people are going to be the only people that get money. Does that light a fire under your ass the whole time, and you're not as easy to just chill and let these people pass you? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I don't know that it affected things. I think that, I mean, they certainly knew that they had to be in that top 4.
Yes, to move on. But I think that they all assumed that because they were in the final, they were all going to get money.
Yeah. Yeah, I think one of them even said as much. So, yeah, it probably did affect things.
Yeah, super interesting anyways. But
I wonder why they made that decision to not tell them in advance.
Just another reveal, I guess, just to see the disappointment on Tony's face. Like, let's get to Tony for a second, right? So we just talked about Leroy and the season that Leroy had, and it would have been great to see Leroy continue and, win finally. Tony, kind of had the opposite sort of season as Leroy, right? If Leroy was in the background for the most part, Tony was at the forefront, winning challenges. As we mentioned earlier, he had the most money heading into the final elimination, or the final finale, I guess. But Tony comes out, he has a disappointing final, and he gets no money at all. Leroy made the comment saying this has to really burn Tony because he turned on a bunch of people, he made a lot of extra vendettas that will stick with him going forward, and it was also all for nothing because he leaves with no money. Is that true? Like, is this a major disappointment for Tony? Or can he look at the season overall and be like, hey, I had a good run. I made it to the final. I almost won.
I mean, I think it depends on Tony's headspace. Because, like, if Tony is thinking about, like, real life and, like, his own personal growth, he should see this as a victory.
Okay.
Right? Because he was a guy...
He stayed out of trouble.
He stayed
out of trouble. No fights, no drunk Tony. Yeah.
But if he is thinking just purely in terms of winning, I think that, like, if he doesn't look at that bigger picture, then I think he's going to be disappointed.
Yeah. I think it's kind of interesting, though, looking forward, and it'll so depend on whenever they do the next season of the challenge, right?
Yeah. Well,
whoever the cast is always super important. But if you're Tony especially, it's going to be really important because you know the Bananas crew of Leroy and whoever else is, like, Tony better hope he has more numbers on his side because you know he's going to have, like, he might replace Corey as being at the forefront of everyone's hit list, right? And the one thing is, if you look at, let's say the biggest move that Johnny Bananas made was taking the money from Sarah, right?
Yeah.
Now, everyone looks at him as a backstabber, and that was the worst move ever. But he came out with a lot of money. So he can always look at it and say, well, you know what? I did make this shady move, but I won a lot of money. That helped my situation. Tony, on the other hand, turned on these people, especially Johnny Bananas, who he would refer to as, like, his big brother, right? And you come away with nothing. That's kind of whack. Like, that kind of sucks, no?
It does suck. And I don't know, this is a fun fact about Tony. I don't know if you know this, but he has 2 baby girls. And and money is...
I didn't know that, actually.
I wish they would give us that kind of background on the competitors, right? Like, I wish someone had mentioned that repeatedly at every opportunity. But but I know that for Tony, being able to provide for his 2 budding families is a pressing concern. So I'm sure he's disappointed that he didn't get that money because, to your point, he burned a lot of bridges. Whenever he is next on, it is going to be a problem for him. And I bet Tony is on the next full season of the challenge.
For sure, right? Because he's always going to try to come back to make more money, right? So that's going to be, like, he has to come back on. And he talked about it all the time, right? He wants to win money for his 2 daughters.
Yep.
And in his mind, this is a great way, a quick way to try to make a flip, try to make some money. And his problem now going forward is you burned your bridges with the Nelson side and the Corey side, right? You burned that bridge already. And now you probably burned your bridge with the Bananas and, you know, the kind of old regime side as well. So remember, because he was cool with the Corey crew and all that, but then when he sided with the Banana side, he kind of burned that bridge. So Nelson and them don't really fuck with Tony anymore. But now you turned your back on those guys, on Bananas and them as well. Where do you go? You better hope that you just continue to win challenges and, like, you know, stay on Zach's side, I guess. Him and Zach, hopefully they can, I don't know. But it's a tough spot for Tony for sure. And it's a disappointing ending to a season that had a lot of promise for Tony.
It did. And he played his best game ever. But, yeah, in terms of his long-term success, I don't know. Because, I mean, he could, like, make the argument and ingratiate himself to the, like, Nelsons and Coreys of the world, and, like, if he comes back, like Dario, like, he could get along with them, I think, because he kind of bridges the gap between generations. But I also think that when push comes to shove, they're gonna, like, if they do form an alliance and they do start to run and they do start to do well, but they have to let someone go, Tony would be the first one out, right? Like, Corey and Nelson and Hunter.
Hunter, yes.
Like, if those 3 are in an alliance with Tony, but they have to, like, sacrifice someone, it's going to be Tony.
Yeah.
Right? Because those 3 have always had each other's backs.
Unless it's an eating challenge, and then Tony's probably going to win, right?
Yeah. Man, talk about... I mean, you're joking about it, but really, that challenge changed everything for Tony. Like that's really what got the Zach and Tony train rolling.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it's just because he's a disgusting human being who can apparently eat anything.
What a season for Tony. I mean, he played it correctly. He just didn't show up. And again, this is to me the beauty of why this show is so good, because there's so many different angles to it, right? And not only do you have to learn how to play your strengths, right, which might not be, winning challenges, it might be the political game. Tony played to his strengths, right? He was winning challenges. Him and Zach figured out the game and how to take control of the game each and every week in terms of sending in whoever they wanted to send in, but they were in total control of it all. And then you get to the end and it doesn't really matter. To me, that's the biggest reason why this show is so good. And especially when you compare it to a lot of other reality shows, because you can kind of tell, okay, well, this person's running the house, they're probably going to win. And that's kind of how it plays out. Or even, oh, well, this person's going to get turned on. Like, everyone's going to turn on this person because they made too many dirty moves.
Yeah.
This time it didn't even go down like that. It just came down to, hey, the final's really tough, and these other guys beat them. And all the great moves that you made earlier on in the season mean absolutely nothing.
I will say...
Another great season of the challenge.
I will say all 8 of the people in the final deserve to be there. Like, I know they were all calling Kyle a layup, but I think he deserved to be there. Right? Like, there's no one there who I was like,
there's no,
man.
like, floater.
Yeah.
Like,
what are you doing here?
Normally each and every year, you're right. Normally each and every year there's, like, someone who's just taken to the final because they think that they're easy. And so they stay in the game because people want to go against them in the final. This year, you can't really say that.
And
totally agree.
The only person who I would have liked to have seen in the final is Devin, who didn't make it.
Yeah,
Devin's the only one. Where
a lot of people
you played so well, and he sort of did well without a strong alliance. Like, I wouldn't say he was a floater, but he didn't have a ride or die crew.
Totally right.
But
I agree.
But that said, I also think it's fair to say that Kyle outplayed him ultimately.
Yep.
So
Yep.
So we've alluded to this, but the final, the real final, the big final, as they say in freestyle skiing competition, because I know our listeners are big on the freestyle skiing scene, is Zach and Kyle and Cara Maria and Kayla, and they just have to do this memory game. When we leave them on the show, they say that it's pretty clear that Zach and Cara Maria are in the lead, and it sort of closes with Zach saying, realizing that both Zach and Cara Maria are one polka dot away from being correct. They just have to figure it out. Who do you think? Mm-hmm. Who do you think is going to win?
I think Cara's going to win, and I don't really like Cara as a character on this show. Mm-hmm. I think that she has, I don't want to say an easy pass, but when you see Laurel come back and even Tori, it's kind of a reminder that she kind of has an easy route in this game, right? There's not the strong competitors and the real A-list competitors on the female side aren't really that strong. Kam and Kayla are pretty new. They're solid, but they're still pretty new for the most part, right? But there's no real, there's no Laurel around. There's no Emily around. There's no, you know what I mean? And so I think this is going to be a win for Cara that she can add to her trophy case as being one of the best competitors. But I don't know. I'm not that impressed. And I don't know if that's because I don't really care about Cara that much, or if it's just that the female competitors, the competition isn't really that good. I don't know. But I think Cara is going to win. One thing I do want to ask you though about this, Zach made the comment.
Yes, I'm glad you brought this
that's
up.
Enough money, right? Like so what's the total when you add in the winnings and then whatever the final pot is?
If he wins, it's a minimum of $370,000. He had something like $28,000 in the bank, so he would be at almost $400,000.
Yes. So, and he says that's enough money to live off for the rest of his life. Now, he kind of said it with a smile, right? So there's a chance that he's like joking around, right? And I'll say this. This is going to sound bad, right? I feel like someone might be able to make, someone might be able to live off of $400,000 for the rest of their life because they'd be smart enough with smart investments and putting money away, putting their money into certain things. Someone might be able to flip that $400,000 into something that they'd be able to live off for the rest of their life. I just don't know if that person is Zach. Do you know what I mean? That might sound harsh, and I think I did a good job of just not calling him dumb because that's not what I intended to do there. But you know what I mean?
Yeah, you couched it well.
Yeah.
And maybe we're biased because we live in Toronto, which is the second most expensive city to live in our country. And $400,000... I was looking...
Yeah, you're right, actually. I am thinking of that in the wrong way. Yeah, you're totally right.
But, true. As soon as he said it, I'm like, $400,000, that's maybe living in Toronto for 5 years. Like, a lump sum for our non-Canadian listeners, a lump sum of $400,000 you would have a hard time buying a one-bedroom condo in Toronto for $400,000.
What's the average house go for in Toronto? $1 million?
It's $1 million Canadian.
Or maybe it's like 900 Canadian or something.
Yeah. So for him to, and I guess it would be an American, it'd be USD, so that would make it like 600,000 Canadian. But it still isn't like you could live off of it for, if you're very careful, you could live off of it for a decade in Toronto. But Zach's from Michigan, and if you lived in in Detroit, Michigan, you could buy quite a bit with $400,000.
Oh yeah, you could own a block for that much.
And
you could actually buy out a block of houses.
Yeah, if he decided to go back to his hometown of Michigan, his home state of Michigan, he would be doing well. And Cara Maria lives in Idaho, or is it North Dakota?
I don't even remember.
She lives in the Midwest, North United States. That would also go far. That $400,000. My point is that $400,000 would not go as far in Toronto, Vancouver, Los Angeles, New York City, or Miami.
Chicago.
Yeah, but depends on how dangerous a part of Chicago you want to live in. But
true.
If you were willing to live in a smaller center or a small town like Cara Maria does, you'd be doing all right. But Zach's estimation, I think, was generous.
Yeah, it was interesting. So, I mean, maybe when you put it that way and you talk about, if he, again, going back to my point, $400,000 in the U.S., if you know what you're doing, you make some good investments, you make some good real estate investments, yeah, you probably could live off of $400,000 for the rest of your life. But I don't know if Zach's that guy.
Yeah.
Maybe someone else has some info on that, and I could be wrong. And Zach's a really smart dude and knows how to put his money to work. Cool. I could be wrong. In fact, I hope I'm wrong.
I also hope that we're wrong, because Zach has really grown on me.
Yeah, I'm interested to see another season, though, if Jenna comes back. And Jenna will come back, but, another season of Zach and Jenna and just how that goes down. Because I feel like we got a really different picture of Zach here, and there are only a couple times where he made a lot of interesting comments, I'll say, where I was kind of reminded, oh yeah, he's normally a jerk on these shows.
Yeah.
right? So I'm interested to see how it would play out again if Jenna came back, because that kind of seems to be where we see that side of Zach, right? Like, I'll never forget that moment of Jenna calling. Actually, it wasn't a season that Zach was on, but they were dating. Jenna was on the show. Jenna calls to check in on Zach, and Zach thinks that it's another girl that's calling him. Or, sorry, not another girl, his other girl, his side chick, or maybe Jenna's a side chick. I don't know. But, like, I'll never forget that moment. And, you know, that's what I'll remember Zach for a lot.
Yeah, that was brutal.
Horrible.
I have to ask. I mean, it's kind of hard, but for you, who killed it this week?
Okay, so Kyle killed it, but it's not for the reason you think.
Oh.
I'm not giving Kyle credit for, you know, beating Tony and Leroy. I'm not giving him credit for beating them because he did such an amazing job. I'm giving him credit and saying that he killed it for just taking advantage of the situation that was placed in front of him. Right? Mm-hmm. I think that he came in second because they fucked up in the beginning part where they were putting all the torches in each other's baskets, and Kyle was just able to take advantage of them focusing on each other, and he was able to then win. Now, if this was all played straight up, does that mean that Leroy would have beaten him? I don't know. But I do know that he got to waste a lot less energy in that portion of the challenge, which I'm pretty sure if you told Tony or you told Leroy, hey, you guys could, all that energy you used up in putting torches in each other's baskets, you get to save that energy for the final run against Kyle. I bet you they would take that trade-off, right? So again, I'm not going to boost Kyle as much as I saw a lot of stuff on Twitter, you know, gassing Kyle, saying how great he is and all that. And hey, more power to him. He got to the final. Credit to him for that. But I'm not giving him that much credit as much as I'm going to say those other people fucked up.
Yeah.
But I will say he killed it for taking advantage of the situation placed in front of him. I hope that makes sense.
Absolutely. And I agree. They did fuck up. I think, as much as I love him, I think the biggest mistake was it seemed like Leroy was walking in that final bit.
Yes, definitely.
Right? Because as I said earlier in this episode, he had stopped Kyle. Like, he had a 2-minute head start or whatever on Kyle. And, like, you have to expect that as you're walking, Kyle's going to run. So, like, Leroy should have been running too. But...
yeah, and remember, Leroy did say, those guys ran past me.
Yeah.
Right?
Those are his words.
Yeah. Not a good look. Not a good look. Who killed it for you?
I have to agree, Kyle, because he was really underestimated. I don't think he's going to win, but he played the best cards that were handed to him, and like he was in first when it came to like after the swords, after the torches. He just did well. All things considered, he did really, really well. And no one will ever underestimate him again. Like, if he decides to come back, true. And I think he will, he has to come in with a different strategy, because he can't. Playing dumb won't work anymore. No one's going to see him as a layup anymore.
So neither of us picked Zach. Interesting.
Well,
interesting. I don't have a reason for it, and obviously I didn't pick Zach, so I'm calling out myself as well. But it's just funny that neither of us picked Zach. Yeah, but that's okay. That's fine.
Well, I think
maybe he'll end up winning the money.
I think Zach is performing up to expectations, whereas Kyle is exceeding expectations.
Okay. Well, Zach, you talked about it before too. Whereas our prior memories of Zach in finals is Zach gassing out.
Yeah.
Right? Because he gassed out with Emily and Laurel.
Yep.
Right? And this time, I mean, I think you touched on this from the very first episode when Zach, I'm pretty sure, came in second in that first challenge where they had to climb up the hill, right? Or that mountain, right?
Yep. And he's looking leaner in general. He did. He was top 3 for sure.
Yeah. It was Joss came in first, and I think Zach was second.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly. And maybe Natalie was third, something like that. But anyways, he did a really good job then. And I remember you made the point then to bring up, we're used to seeing Zach gas out, and maybe this is a different Zach. And you're proven to be right, as he's here in the finals, doing a great job, did not gas out in first place. So we'll see how it finishes up.
Whatever he's doing differently in terms of his workout, it's paying off for him. He's doing less weightlifting and more of that DDP yoga to get lean but stay
Yes.
strong. A lot more body weight
Yes.
exercises.
Dun, dun, dun.
So I guess we should say where the good people can find us online. I am on
Yes.
Twitter at jchidleyhill.
And I am on Twitter at Shell Alexander, and on Instagram at Sheldon Alexander. And you know what? Just a reminder, right? Because there's so many places you can find this podcast. You can find the You Killed It podcast on SoundCloud. Subscribe there. You can find the podcast on iTunes. Subscribe there. Rate there. All those other fun things. You can even find us on YouTube if that works better for you, which I don't know why it would, but just in case it does, we're there too.
I have to say, I do listen to a lot of podcasts off of YouTube. So maybe there's other weirdos out there like me.
Actually, you know what? The reason I put it up there was because there are a lot of podcasts that people listen to on YouTube. I just don't know how or when I would do that. I guess maybe when I'm just on my computer. I don't know. But it seems to be a thing. So, yeah, and we're doing pretty well on that as well. So why not, right?
Yeah.
More options. Nothing wrong with options.
I should say you can also follow me on Instagram at jchidleyhill, but that's, I don't know, there's not a lot of challenge-related content. It's just me doing stuff in life. So not super exciting, but, if you want to peek behind the curtain at how I conduct my business, you go right ahead and follow me on Instagram. Jemmy follows me on Instagram, and Marie follows me on Instagram. So,
Hey.
So there you go. Until next week, this was You Killed It.
You killed